Chapter 5. How Maddie Died. Nate wouldn't come out of his room for dinner. He wanted to talk to someone about what he had seen, but couldn't even figure out how to explain what had happened. If he could explain, or at least describe it, who could he tell? Mom? She wouldn't believe him. She'd probably think he was making it up to get them to move back to Boston. Worse, she might think he was crazy and make him talk to a counselor or a doctor. There was no one around here he knew well enough to call. If he called one of his friends back in Boston, they'd think he had gone nuts. So he sat in his room, staring out the window, wondering what was roaming the woods that night and if it was coming for him next. He tried to sleep, but with every little creak or snap he'd jump up, his heart pounding, sure Maddie's pa was at the window. It was an old house, so something was always creaking. Plus a storm was blowing in, and all the trees around the yard added their scratching and cracking to his constant alarms. Finally he gave up and sat at his desk, staring out the window, waiting for it to get light. By morning he could hardly keep his eyes open, but the light from the morning sun made him feel a little safer. For once he was glad to go to school. School, with its solid walls, bright lights, and even all the rules, made Nate feel safe. Ghosts couldn't show up dripping and swinging axes in the middle of Miss Robin's math class. If they tried, she'd probably make them sit in the corner and stay after school to work word problems. The school day passed quickly. As he headed home, he had almost convinced himself that yesterday's adventure was something he had made up. It just wasn't possible. There couldn't be a cemetery full of ghosts who talked to him, or a girl who had drowned forever ago who wanted his help. There certainly was not some huge evil spirit stalking around with a killer axe, planning to do a whole collection of gross and painful things to him. That happened in movies, not in little towns in the country in the 21st century. However, just to be safe, he figured it would be best to walk down the road from school and not go through the woods to get home. The road was fine. It was solid and real. The sun was shining down on him. Nothing strange or scary was going on. There were plenty of kids around. He felt safe. Then he came to the bridge across Yoakum Brook. Just across that short bridge was his house. He could see it right there. Safe. Strong. He could run all the way there and not be out of breath. Still, he couldn't help but think about the last time he was there, when Maddie's pa was standing in the middle of the bridge, waiting, huge axe in hand. Creepy, evil grin splitting his face. Nate slowed down. Finally he came to a complete stop. He looked around. Across the street the library doors were open and a couple of kids were going in to get help with their homework. A few clouds were floating in the deep blue sky. A little breeze rustled the leaves. Everything was fine. He shook his head. "Chicken," he said with a laugh, and started across. Of course he made it across with no problem. He was laughing some more at himself and thinking about what he might be able to scrounge in the kitchen before Mom came home from work, when Maddie stepped out from behind a tree. "Come on, we gotta go see someone." "Ah!" Nate screamed as he dropped his books and looked around for somewhere to run. Maddie shook her head. "You better start paying more attention, boy. Pa ain't one to be trifled with." "Go away!" Nate yelled. "You're dead. Ever since I met you, I've been scared or grossed out. Now I'm being hunted by some creature who did awful things to you and wants to do the same to me. Everything was fine before you showed up. No one bothered me. That's the reason I stay to myself. Other people just cause problems." Maddie's eyes blazed with anger. "You are so dumb," she yelled back at him. "You can't lump everyone together and throw the whole kit and caboodle away. Some people cause problems, sure. Others help you when you're troubled, or help you pass the time when you're bored, or help you feel better when you're feeling bad, or watch out for you. Folks like that are called friends. Not that you'd know anything about friends." She was so angry she was shaking. She poked him in the chest. "Friends is the light in the darkness. Friends is food for your heart. I need friends and I'm dead, and you need 'em even more. You needed 'em before you met me, and just 'cause Pa's causing problems, that don't change a tick. Now, You may not think I'm your friend, but I'm about the only friend you got right now, and you're in a heap of trouble, more trouble than you know." She held up her hand before Nate could say anything. "I know a lot of that is my fault. He's my pa, and I gotta take responsibility for that. But you got to shoulder some of the load, 'cause you can see me, and that means there's something different or special about you. Besides, fault don't matter, reason don't matter. I ain't gonna leave you to face Pa by your own self. I'm gonna help you, 'cause that's what friends do." Nate looked at her, stunned at how mad she was. "I don't get it. You need a friend? How come? Why would a ghost need a friend? I'm always confused when you start to talk." "That's 'cause you're so dumb. I don't need a friend. I got friends. I need some help. You, on the other hand, need a friend in the worst way. You're fixin' to take a long walk down a real lonesome road. If you don't change up fast, you're going to be one of those folks who is always alone, even when they're in a room full up to the rafters with people. People help each other. That's what we do. You're so wrapped up in your own little world that you can't or won't see nothing further than the end of your nose. It's not my fault. I didn't want to come here. I didn't want to." Wanna," she yelled. "You didn't wanna anything. You still don't wanna. So what? You think I wanted to die? Or get stuck walking around dripping like a bucket waiting to see if Pa gets to take me away forever? Let me tell you something. I didn't choose any of it. Sometimes things just happen." "What do you mean?" Maddie sighed. "I guess it's time to tell you a few things about why I'm here and why Pa—" "Is he here?" Nate looked around, scared. "Nah, not right now, but he's always prowling around. Some folks are like that." "What's he got against you? I thought fathers were supposed to watch out for their kids." Maddie cocked her head and looked at Nate, her eyes full of sadness. "You know that ain't always the way things are." She sighed. "Pa wasn't always so bad. Of course, he weren't all that good either. Some folks is just born mean, but mostly he'd leave me alone. Ma could always get him to behave. He minded her. Then Ma died. It was the influenza." "Flu? She died of the flu? Nobody dies from the flu." Maddie shook her head. "Not so much anymore, but when I was alive, lots of people did. Ma had been ailing for a few years. She never got back to her old self after my sister was born, and—" "Wait a minute. You have a sister? Is she a ghost too?" "No, Tegan's still kicking." "Alive? She must be about 1,000,000 years old." Maddie stuck out her tongue. "I can tell math ain't your best subject. She ain't no spring chicken, but she's still pretty spry. She's a bit at the other side of 90. Sounds like you've seen her. You know where she is?" Maddie crossed her arms. "Every one thing I tell you, you ask for a whole nother tale. Now, I got the time, but it's going to get dark soon, and Pa's going to come looking, and if I was you, I'd want to know what to do about that. Now, how about you? You want to keep asking me to tell stories, or you want to hear about Pa?" Nate said, "If it explains why he wants to kill you and me, or it gives me any idea how to keep that from happening, I want to know everything you can tell me." "He can't kill me, leastwise not again. He already did it once, or did you forget I'm dead?" "He killed you? Why?" "If you'd let me get a word in edgewise, I'd tell you." Nate started to object, but Maddie held up her hand to stop him. "Here's what you're going to do. Pick up a pebble and put it in your mouth and hold it under your tongue till I tell you it's okay to take it out. That way, I can tell you one whole story without you interrupting, and I won't have to pop my eyeball out to make you shut up. Deal?" "You wouldn't pop your eyeball," Nate started to say. Maddie grinned and started to dig in her eye socket with her finger. Nate quickly grabbed her hand. Okay, stop." Maddie glared and pointed to a bunch of pebbles near his feet. Nate shrugged, sighed, picked up a pebble, then popped it into his mouth. Maddie nodded. "Okay, good. Now I can tell her the way I want to. After Ma died, there was no one who could control Pa. He started hitting me regular and getting drunk every night. I didn't like it, but there weren't a lot I could do about it. You seen him. He was way bigger than me. Those days, there weren't nobody in schools to talk to. Ain't like now when you got counselors and teachers and such who'll do something about it if a kid's getting hit or not fed or anything else. Back then, what happened at home was supposed to stay at home. Besides, I took it because I didn't want him to start on Tegan. She was still just a young un, about 3 and a half. When he was drunk, it weren't so bad. He'd just crash into things and fall asleep. But when he woke up mean. Then Pa ran out of money. I heard him talking to Mr. Waltrip in the next town. He was making a deal to hire me out to be a servant there. Pa would take all my wages so he could always have money for whiskey. Now, I didn't mind none about getting hired out. Putting distance between Pa and me was fine. The work didn't bother me neither. I was already doing all the work around the house. My worry was Tegan. I weren't going to leave her for Pa to start in on. "What do you do?" Nate asked, trying to talk around the pebble. Matty glared at him and started to poke at her eye again. He waved his hands wildly, begging her to stop, and mimicked locking his lips and throwing away the key. Matty nodded and continued. That winter was bitter cold, with more snow than I'd ever seen. Great big drifts near covered the doors. We'd open the door and just see a wall of snow. The spring was late a-comin'. I thought we'd never get out of that house. Finally, it started warming a bit, and we had the first big storm that was rain, not snow. Pa went out to sign the deal with Mr. Waltrip and came back with a bottle of whiskey he got as a bonus. Pa sat up late searching for the bottom of that bottle. I waited till he had passed out. Then I got Tegan all bundled up, and we snuck out into the pouring rain and lightning and made a run for it. We was heading up here because Ma had a sister in Beckett. She always told me if things got real bad, I should aim for her sister. Tegan and me hoofed it for 3 days, and most of the nights. We kept off the roads as much as we could, feared Pa would be after us, but there was piles of snow, and we weren't big. All 3 days it never stopped raining, but that last day was the worst. It was like a river pouring out of the sky. All day we slogged through it. We was cold and wet to our bones. Tegan had been soldiering on as best she could, but she was so little and we was so cold and wet and tired. She kept sniveling, but I made her stick with it. Tried to make it a game. Said we could stop for a piece if we could march a whole 300 steps, and we'd count 'em out loud. Sometimes I'd carry her. I done everything I could think of to get some space between us and Pa. About midnight that night, it was raining so hard and we were so tired. We just had to stop to get out of the cold and wet, at least for a spell. I thought we might have made it to Beckett. There weren't no sign, and no one was outside on account of the rain and how late it was, but I could see a factory over one part of the brook, a mill near a bridge, a church near the bend in the road, and a fancy roadhouse, just like Ma had talked about. I figured not many places had all them things in one spot, so I was hoping. It didn't make no difference. We had to get out of the rain, warm our bones, and rest a piece. I saw an old shed cross the bridge. It looked like a storehouse for the mill. I figured it had to be dry to keep the grain from spoiling, and there shouldn't be nobody in it. So that's where we headed. Walking that bridge was like a funhouse ride, but 'tweren't no fun. Bridge was shaking and moaning like a live thing 'cause of all the water pounding on it. The brook below looked like the entire ocean was pouring down a little drain pipe. All the snow melting plus 3 days of rain were trying to get down that brook to the river, and the water was climbing up the banks and fixing to flood. Whole trees was bouncing along in the current. The bridge creaked and swayed as we went across, holding on to the railings for dear life. Our knuckles were white as bones from gripping so hard. It seemed like the bridge was trying to dance out from under our feet or bounce us off into the river below. I thought it was going to bust apart or we'd fall off and we'd be done for, but finally we made it across. We caught our breath and staggered to the shed. We caught a bit of luck there. The chain on the door was loose enough for us to squeeze in, so in we went. It was nice and dry, and there was soft burlap bags to lie on. Didn't take long, and we fell asleep. Nate started to say something, but Matty glared at him. That ain't the end of the story. Let me tell it like she happened. You got questions after, you can ask. Nate nodded, and Matty continued. A couple hours later, I woke up just as the door busted apart. Pa was standing there like the devil hisself, rain pouring off him, steam rising up from his anger. He was hefting a huge axe, swinging it this way and that. All the while he was cussing so hard he was spitting. Said he was going to teach me a lesson for running, and then he'd start learning Tegan the same thing. I jumped at him, and he slapped me so hard I slammed against the wall, my ears a ringing and my head all woozy so's I could hardly stand. He started after me, raising the axe to finish the job. Tegan jumped up, grabbed his leg, and bit him. He howled and raised up his boot to kick her head in. He would have killed her with one kick. I felt a shovel on the wall near where I fell. I grabbed it and brought it down, bang, on his head. Matty was breathing hard, obviously remembering the fight. He was bleeding and he swayed a bit, but didn't go down. He turned toward me and I yelled, "You're too fat and stupid to ever catch me, you drunken demon!" And I headed out the door into the rain, running as fast as my tired legs could carry me. I knew he'd chase me. He hated being called stupid more than just about anything. I wanted him to chase me so he'd leave Tegan be. I looked back, and he was running full speed, holding the axe over his head with death in his eyes. I ran toward the bridge, just aiming to get him as far from Tegan as I could. I was running for my life, but he was gaining, and I knowed he was going to catch me. So, in the middle of the bridge, I stopped and turned. Funny, I knowed these was my last minutes to be alive, and time slowed way down, and I took in near everything all around. I could see it was getting light, just coming up on dawn. I could feel the rain pounding onto my head. Standing on the bridge with Pa bearing down on me, even though it was near my last breath, I still noticed the brook was almost dry, and I remember thinking how strange that was, since it had been so high and was still raining, so it should have been worse, not lower. All that time, Pa was getting closer and closer. He got right up on me at the middle of that bridge. He had his big old axe held up high, dripping water and death. I had the shovel. I was 11 and small. He was, well, you saw him. Nate shuddered, thinking of Matty standing up against that monstrous demon. He took a swing, and I ducked under it, but I heard it swing close. I whacked him on the knee with the shovel. Didn't slow him down, just made him madder. He backed me up against the railing of the bridge. He had the head of that axe under my chin and was just pushing me back and back and back. Matty stretched her head back like she could still feel the axe on her chin. She looked at Nate and continued. He growled real low and mean. "I was going to get money from you working gal, but nobody on this earth lays a hand on me and lives. So I guess I'm going to have to put that sister of yourn to work, and there's nothing you can do about it, 'cause you're going to be chopped to pieces." Matty took a breath. It seemed hard for her to tell the story, but she wanted Nate to know. Then he jammed his knee into my gut to hold me tight, and he lifted up that axe to chop me. The bridge was slippery from all the rain, and he was a bit teetery, standing on one foot and with whatever liquor he still had rolling around his brain. But he didn't need much strength, just enough to lift that axe and bring it down on my head, and that was going to be it for me. I figured my only chance was to wait till the very last tick and try to twist away, but he had me awful tight. Nate's eyes were huge. He could see Matty trapped there, just waiting for the axe to fall. But before he could do the deed, I heard a huge roar, so loud it thundered out over the pounding rain. It was just getting a little light, so I could see up the brook a piece, and what I saw took my breath away. A wall of water, taller than all the buildings around and most of the trees, was crashing down right at us. I guess all those logs in the water had blocked the brook for a while, and that's why the water had stopped. All that water had built and built up, and then it busted loose and was coming straight for us. As I watched, the water crashed into the factory up the way, and the buildings just folded and fell in, faster than I could think the wall of water was on us. Pa heard the sound and half turned, and I saw a timber from the factory catch him full in the chest and heave him up. I figured I was saved. All I had to do was hold on to the bridge somehow, and I would be fine once the wave passed. But somehow, at the very last second, Pa reached out his hand and latched hold of me, and we was both swept away. Mattie stopped and looked down at the brook as the water calmly cascaded over stones with a cheerful sound. She blinked her eyes. I don't remember much after that. I was in the current, tumbling ever which way. I recall looking up and seeing the broken bridge above me, but I was looking at it through what seemed like a mile of water. Then everything was black. Later, I don't know how long, it could have been days or weeks or even years, I woke up back here. Things looked different a bit. The bridge was built up again, but the factory was gone. I walked around, getting to know the place. I found if I tried to go more than about a mile up the road, I'd snap right back here like I was hooked to a slingshot or something. Mattie looked around at the hills, at the bridge, at Nate, and down at the ground and sighed. That's how it's been ever since. Nate spit out the pebble he had kept in his mouth and looked at her, wanting to make her feel better. He reached out and touched her shoulder. Even though it made his hand go numb with cold, he rubbed her shoulder. I'm sorry, he said. I'll hang out with you if that will help. I mean, you're right. It's not like I really have any friends. And from what Mom says, I'm not going back to Boston anytime soon, so we could... Mattie shook her head like she was trying to clear her mind, and water went flying. Thanks, Nate, but I don't have much time. We got work to do. She stood and headed back toward the woods. But first, we got to get you some protection so as you can stay breathing and useful while you're helping. Come on. Without looking back, she headed up the hill behind the house. Nate looked around for some kind of explanation, but she didn't say any more, so he hurried after her.